No, ain't no black person wants Starbucks in their neighborhood. And this is one thing that people have to realize. What black people are looking for themselves, what we find aesthetically pleasing, and the things that we're into are not necessarily the things that society wants to give us.
Not to, to what we're alluding to with the BLM thing. Now, we talked about how, you're heavily involved in other dance styles, the open styles and so on and so forth. Now, this one's a little bit, it's kind of a tougher question. What do you think about, so you have this community that you're a part of, and there's a lot of like, the LBGTQ people, members that participate in these dances as well, right? Like with the whacking and, house dancing, so on and so forth. Matter of fact, wasn't whacking created by, I think, black members of the LBGTQ community, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so, what do you think, though, in this era of intersectionality, of them, like, one-to-one comparing their struggle with the African-American struggle?
It's something that you should never do because, one, it's not the same, and you don't compare apples to oranges. Every time people make comparisons, especially when it comes to black people, first of all, everyone compares themselves to black people when it comes to suffering. So chances are that everyone sees us as the bottom of the totem pole or whatever you want to use as a marker. That's one. Two, if you want to, you can hide your sexual orientation. I can't hide this. This is it. So it's understanding that there's different things and society works in different ways. There's different access and advantages for certain things. And it's understanding also the different spaces that you're in. You can't just say like, oh, well, it's the same as like, no, it doesn't work like that. It's like, for example, right now, there's been a rise in violence against Asian communities because of whatever people believe when it comes to coronavirus or whatnot. I'm sorry, but you cannot compare that to the African-American experience. It's false comparisons, false narratives, and that's dangerous because people are not doing their research and they're just looking to whatever looks like suffering. It becomes the suffering Olympics. Doesn't work.
Who's going to get the gold?
Exactly.
Suffering Olympics. That is funny.
And what's crazy about that is that instead of dismantling the system that creates this suffering, people are comparing suffering for benefits and advantages.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And then at the end of the day, even when you look, let's say, into one of these, like the LBGTQ community, right? Okay, who's at the bottom of the LBGTQ community?
Nothing more clearly illustrates that racism is alive and well in the gay community than this election season. Don't believe me? Ask the gays. For Trump. Like a rich zaddy on Fire Island, the alt-right has penetrated the hearts of some impressionable young men. Overgrown twinks with a penchant for harassing successful black comedians or purchasing followers on Twitter have become the fresh new face on the same reliable racism of yesteryear.
Black Lives Matter doesn't really care about black lives. People are killed by police about as often as they're struck by lightning, but I don't see many protests about storms.
Last I checked, we can't prevent lightning, we don't pay for it with our tax dollars, and clouds weren't caught on camera racially profiling people or shooting unarmed civilians. Oh, and while we're on the topic, you're actually 4 times more likely to be killed by lightning than a terrorist. But I don't see us bombing the shit out of storms.
Oh, the same people that are at the bottom of the country. 100%. So maybe your bigger problem is, this thing. But yeah, I always thought that, and I've had these conversations with people respectfully, you know what I'm saying? Just saying that, I understand that there's pain there, there's being neglected there, but, there's always, if I could see in that community that everybody had an equal share, then I would be like, well, yeah, okay, I see where you're coming from, because in this community, we're all equal. We all own the same stuff. We all have the same access, so on and so forth. But because being in this community, we are held down.
Yeah.
But when I see that your race is holding you down even within that community, because if you go to, to the LBGT community, to their actual communities, when you start seeing the rainbow flags and stuff, and you start seeing, well, who owns the businesses here? You know, who has the access here? So on and so forth. It's the same layout as the rest of the country.
The thing that people forget is that regardless in what marginalized community you live in, you still operate under society's rules. So doesn't matter if you're Jewish, Black Jews are going to be at the bottom of the totem pole. Doesn't matter if you're LGBTQ, Black are going to be at the bottom. Doesn't mean anything if you're you understand what I mean? It's like the bottom common denominators for a lot of these marginalized groups end up being Black.
I got one for you, and people might not agree with it, even if you're a billionaire.
1%, as you well know, is overwhelmingly white. We're talking about the top tier of Americans who have and own a majority of the nation's wealth. These are people who are uber rich. There are a few African Americans who have made it to that tier, but compared to the number of whites in the 1%, they are literally a percent of the 1%.
So why is the 1% so white? It has to do with something called the racial wealth gap.
For every dollar of wealth held by the typical white household, the typical African American household owns only 6 cents of wealth.
6 cents, you heard right. So how did we get here?
When you think about wealth, you have to understand that it's generational, that wealth left over generations actually compounds and builds and grows. African Americans were held as slaves and they weren't allowed to earn any income. They weren't allowed to own things at one point in this history, and that actually has contemporary effects.
Oh, 100%.
Because, you know, people are going to be like, what do you mean, a billionaire? You got it popping. No, even if you're a billionaire. I've seen a documentary, right? Mm-hmm. Of it was about Black billionaires, which there's like 3 of them. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's more than 3, but you know what I mean, right? And they were talking about when they had to sell their home, beautiful home, looked like a museum, right? They were advised by their realtor to take all their Black pictures down
and put white
because
pictures.
If you don't, it's not gonna sell for a good price. It's not gonna sell, you know, at the price you want. Strictly based on that. So even when we have made, quote unquote, you know, the American dream, it's still a Black curve on it. Yeah, you're a billionaire, but you're a Black billionaire.
Yeah, it's what Jay-Z talks about in the story of OJ. You have comedians like I don't really know if it was Cat Williams, but you have these very successful comedians that are telling you like, yo, I'm in the top of my field as an entertainer. And the guy next to me is a dentist.
I will give you an example of how race affects my life, okay? I live in a place called Alpine, New Jersey. I live in Alpine, New Jersey, right? My house cost millions of dollars. Don't hate the player, hate the game. There are 4 Black people. Hundreds of houses, 4 Black people. Who are these Black people? Well, it's me, Mary J. Blige, Jay-Z, and Eddie Murphy. Only Black people in the whole neighborhood. So let's break it down. Let's break it down. Me, I'm a decent comedian. I'm all right. Mary J. Blige, one of the greatest R&B singers to ever walk the earth. Jay-Z, one of the greatest rappers to ever live. Eddie Murphy, one of the funniest actors to ever do it. Do you know what the white man that lives next door to me does for a living? He's a fucking dentist.
Like this
is Chris Rock.
Yeah,
that was Chris Rock.
That's so that paints a clear narrative for you. And I think people often equate, well, if you made it, then racism must have disappeared. It's like, no. You made it against the odds, but it doesn't necessarily just disappear. You had like Oprah a couple of years back saying like Louis Vuitton kicked her out and told her to get out because they thought she didn't have any money.
And I go into a store, which shall remain unnamed, and I say to the woman, excuse me, may I see that bag right above your head? And she says to me, no, it's too expensive. And I said, no. See the black one, the one that's folded over. And she said, no. You don't want to see that one. You want to see this one because that one will cost too much. You will not be able to afford that. And I said, well, no, I really did want to see that one. And she refused to get it. She refused to get it. And she started to show me these other little bags. And I said, one more time I tried, I said, but I really do just really want to see that one. And she said, oh, I don't want to hurt your feelings. And I said, okay, thank you so much. You're probably right. I can't afford it. And I walked out of the store. Now, why did she do that?
Mm-hmm. And then when they realized it was Oprah, they were like, oh, snap. So racism doesn't disappear just because you have money.
Right. It can just be reduced.
Mm-hmm.
But your lottery card can always be pulled.
Yep.
You know, your ticket can get stamped.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Word.
So the goal for me is not to come here and like, yo, I'm going to turn everyone into beat makers. But it's more an opportunity of like, okay, like let's try this if it's something that you enjoy. And let's see what skills you can learn from that to be able to transfer them in your everyday life. From them to have access to someone or some information that maybe is not in their community. And at the same time, for me to learn from them and have an experience.
For more quality content from Beyond the Cypher with Illskillz, don't forget to press the like and subscribe buttons. Let us know how we're doing down in the comment section. And to make sure that you don't miss anything from the channel, smash that notification bell. We appreciate the love and support. Peace until the next episode.